So you're recording your end?
Come on, I'm live.
You live?
Oh yeah, are we streaming this?
We should stream this one day.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, we should come up with a good one and stream it.
Then people can hear us swearing, which we always edit out of these videos. Philippe, you're a certified flying instructor in the UK. You're probably best placed to answer this question. Why? Why is flight training, or why can it be so flippin' expensive?
That is a $1 million question. I'm going to start and blame the lawyers. So no, I'm not really. The assets are expensive assets. The cheapest flight training airplanes are already 35,000, 40,000 pounds for even the cheapest of aircraft in a flight school. You know, in my flight school at Echelon Air, we use Cirruses, and they're even more expensive than that $50,000 mark. So we have to somehow recover the cost of that capital. Second of all, the flight instructors are highly qualified people. You know, we want our doctors to be well paid. We want our pilots to be well paid.
Well, we're going to talk about some ideas in this video as well about how people can maybe look at reducing some of those costs, and ideas for like how you can, you know, save some money towards your flight training as well. But is there a way to put a figure on how much it costs to get your pilot's license?
Sure. So I started learning how to fly now 20 years ago. When I was ringing around to various flight schools where I lived, I was getting quoted $4,000. I mean, when you're 15, $4,000 is not a bargain, right? It's a huge amount of money. What I've seen is flight training has definitely gotten much more expensive since then. In the UK, I think flight schools, the lowest cost ones are probably quoting around 8,000 to 10,000 pounds, and the higher cost ones are probably quoting around 35,000 to 40,000 pounds. You might end up with the same license, but it'll be the number of hours you've done in the airplane, and then how competent you are maybe as a pilot, what kind of experiences you've had in that flight training. We
have the RPL, we have the recreational pilot's license here. Do you have anything equivalent in the UK? And what do you think about students maybe starting with a lesser version, not a lesser version, but a restricted version of a pilot's license, maybe before going for the full PPL?
Sure. I think even before the restricted license, or in the UK what we call the LAPL, the light aircraft pilot license. In the US it's the recreational pilot's license, right? Each one of those carries different limitations on what you can do with the license. But in Europe, what a lot of young kids do as an entry into aviation, a lot of people get into gliding. And gliding can be a really cost-effective entry point to getting airborne, to understanding aerodynamics, to understanding meteorology, to understanding airport operations. And hopefully as you get better at gliding, then you end up with longer and longer flights. After that, once you're hooked, then moving into fixed wing, that transition is a much smaller step. So you can make each lesson, getting the full PPL, each lesson can count more because you understand a lot more.
And that's a good way to get immersed in that kind of aviation environment as well, because I think one of the key things is you don't necessarily have to start day one with your flight training actually in an aircraft out there flying. I think getting immersed in the aviation environment is really important. Being down at the airport is really important. What about aircraft types then? So you've mentioned gliding, but say your dream is to fly, you know, a jet or an SR-22 or like a top of the line kind of aircraft. Should you learn in the plane you're going to fly in, or should you look at costs in the beginning and try and fly in a cheaper aircraft?
So, I mean, my answer, I guess, to that, it depends on who I'm talking to, right? Let's say you have a second home, or you have a business need, and you see how private aviation can really help you in that, but you don't have a license, and you recognize that that's probably the sticking point here, then yeah, you should probably go train in the airplane that will match, at least initially will match that goal, that mission. I'll tell you what though, that is not the cheapest way to get a pilot's license. The cheapest way to get a pilot's license is probably to go to your local little airport, fly an airplane that's either a Cessna 150, an old PA-28, where they've already fully depreciated. So if your goal is just to learn how to fly, then take a really, really simple plane where there's no complexity. But I'll tell you what, if your goal is to fly from Melbourne to Sydney, and you go through the type of training that's at your local airport in the J3 Cub with 4 gauges, you get your license, you will not be equipped to go from Melbourne to Sydney.
This comes back to our similar video we made on how to buy a plane, which, you know, comes back to, you got to think of the mission objectives here, which is what are you actually using this aircraft for? And I think Flight training is the same thing. What are your objectives with flight training? If it's just because you love the idea of flying, you could follow a path similar to me. I mean, I fly at SR22 now, but yeah, I started in a 150. I did all my navigation training in a Piper Warrior. I did some complex stuff in a Piper Arrow retractable. And it was only when I had my instrument rating that I actually thought, this Cirrus thing sounds quite interesting. I'll have a look at that, and then moved up to that point.
But yeah, if the goal is just to save costs, then generally an older airplane is good, or one that doesn't use avgas. Like, I'm super fired up about electric aircraft for basic training, and there's a couple companies there that are here that are now getting a little bit of traction with that. Like Velis is a European-based company. Their endurance is still only an hour and a half or so, but for your average flight lesson, that's more than sufficient.
That's a good point. I think we have only one flying electric aircraft here in Australia at the moment. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on that. But we had one which was going to be used for flight training as well. But you'd like to see it change. But Rotax as well is the other thing. And so, aircraft that use MOGAS, basically motor vehicle gas, as opposed to avgas as well, there could be some advantages. So I guess it's just look around at the different aircraft types that are available and see what might be more affordable. Irrespective of the aircraft, are there any other ways that you could recommend people could look at how you could reduce flight training costs ongoing? There's the big question as well. Should you prepay as well for your flight training costs to get a reduction in costs?
Now, if you're going to a large flight school that is putting through commercial pilots or airline-bound pilots, let's call them, I think they probably all work on a prepayment basis. So that's just the standard. At your local flight school, it's probably more, you land, you fill in your Hobbs times, and then you take it into the receptionist and they ring it up in the computer and you pay whatever invoice comes out. Sometimes there's non-payment, sometimes the credit card doesn't work. We don't like to chase money. So yeah, we'll always, at least at Echelon Air, we will certainly give a little discount for a prepayment. So yeah, it's one way, but then you have to put down quite a lot of capital. Right, and then you're committed to that flight school. And if you don't get along with the instructor, or you're uncomfortable in their aircraft, or you don't like their training methods, you're kind of locked in. If I were just to go with a hit list of things you can do as a student to lower the costs at risk, because I do run a flight school.
You're giving your secrets away now.
Oh, I was gonna say go with an independent instructor, and you can only do this if your national authority allows it. So in the U.S., for example, you can operate as an independent certified flight instructor and do flight training all day long. So they don't carry any overheads. They will create training programs that are much more tailored to you. The second thing, and this is actually should have been the first, is self-study. You get out of a flight lesson everything you put in. If you show up at a flight lesson, and this is true if you're gonna spend $8,000 or if you're gonna spend $40,000 on a PPL, right? If you come to the lesson prepared, you've done all your flight planning, you've looked at all the NOTAMs, you reviewed the radio procedures, right? If you come really prepared, then that lesson will be hugely valuable. If you get in the airplane and you haven't reviewed the radio procedure, and the instructor sees you fumbling with the radio to write down the ATIS, which you can practice writing down ATIS entirely on your own, there's live ATC, you can write down ATISs all day long, right? So by the time you're sitting in the airplane with the engine running, at 200 pounds an hour, that's 3 pounds a minute. You're sitting there copying down ATIS. If you have to do that twice, that's 6 pounds. Another thing that's also huge, the third thing, is flight sims. Use flight sims at home. And I'm not talking about, certified, although those help too. They're great. We have one at Echelon Air. I'm just talking about Microsoft Flight Sim, X-Plane on your computer. I mean, I just got Microsoft Flight Sim when it came out, the new one. And the ATC, the fake ATC in Microsoft Flight Sim, from the moment that you start up the engine on the apron, it'll guide you through the whole process of leaving an airport, right? You can start to put these pieces together without the instructor present at all.
It's really good because I think they all come down to a pretty similar but very important point, which is the more prepared I think you can be before your training, I think the better you're going to perform. And we've talked about prepayment. Are there any ways that you can ensure that the money that you've put aside for that flight training can actually last to the end of your flight training?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, right? That's a tough one because you might want to throw in a fun lesson here and there, or maybe you want to get a better headset, whatever. And if you're going to flight school, you're ringing around and they're like, okay, it's going to cost you 8,000 pounds to get a license. And you look at the breakdown of what it is that they're quoting you for, If it's the bare bones minimum, you can throw that quote away. To pass a private pilot's license in 40 hours, even in a very, very simple airplane, that's a real task. Take 50% and add it on top.
We were all told to make our calculations on 40 hours. It took me 78 hours to get my PPL.
It's interesting, 78 hours. I think it took me 67.
What are your thoughts on people who take like 2 or 3 weeks off work and do a block of training over a preset, period of time, maybe taking some annual leave or looking at doing it in school holidays if you're still at school?
I'm all for it, but it's not just those 3 weeks, right? That's what we have to remember. What it allows you to find good weather for the correct flight lessons. On a solo day, as an instructor, I want high ceilings, I want no wind, and I want excellent visibility. So I can chase that weather. If I have 3 weeks with a student, I can chase that weather around the country. But there's a lot of work that has to happen before. Your knowledge tests, however many there are in your country, have to be completed. The other thing is, you don't want to just dive in and nobody can handle 8 hours of flight training on lesson number 1. So also being realistic about what is a full day of flight training. By the end of it, you might be going 10 hours in a flight lesson.
The standard path to kind of go down is to pay for yourself, is to save some money, go to your local flight training school, find an instructor, learn to fly down that way. That's how quite a lot of us did it. But there are cadetships, there are scholarships. Got any thoughts on how people could maybe research that and what some of the options are if you didn't want to necessarily pay for yourself to go through flight training in the way that quite a few private pilots do?
Your government's Air Force will probably have a cadet program or some junior airman's program of some sort. In the US, they have an ROTC, it's called, for college kids. They'll even pay for some college. You get some flight hours in it. In the UK, you have the RAF cadets program. If you have the passion for it, and you get through a cadet program and you've done your 8 or 10 or 12 hours, whatever number of hours your government's going to sponsor you for. If you have that intense passion to learn how to fly, you'll find a way to do it. I refereed, so I was living in the US at the time, so soccer matches. I got paid between $16 and $20 a match, and I did 5 of them on a Saturday. And they were an hour and a half each. I did 5 of them on a Saturday, and I had an hour lesson on a Sunday. And that's it. That's how I got my license.
I think it's really important, especially for some of the younger pilots out there, not to put the pressure on yourself to think you have to be flying all the time. And if you're not flying for a week here and there, then, it's going to really impact your career. Some of the people who talk to me are like 15, 16, 17 years old. You have a lot of time ahead of you, and it doesn't matter if there are gaps. When you get to our age, like me and Philippe in this video, maybe it matters a little bit more. But no, if you're young and you're watching this and you've got breaks because of financial issues or you need to direct your attention elsewhere, that's fine.
If you are thinking about a career in aviation, then I think we often have pressures put on us about you have to make money. I know my parents said, I was passionate about aviation. They said, we're not going to support and give you our blessing to go to an aviation school. It felt like it was a make money or it was a versus follow your passion, which I know is completely false. Right? They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
I always make the comparison. I run an aviation business and I have an accountant, right? And my accountant is passionate about aviation. That's why he's my accountant, right? So you can find a passion and you can earn a living and you can be successful.
If you've got questions specifically for Philippe, can I put your details down below as well, Philippe, from Echelon Air?
I love getting messages and emails. I'm on Instagram at Pilot Pullman.
Put your comments down below. We'll try and answer as many as we can. Get in touch with Philippe. But thanks for your time today, mate. I hope we get to fly together for real again soon. It's been too long.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.